Hi, this is Cassie Moore from Deep East, Texas. Welcome to my podcast. I will be reviewing the movie called Galaxy Quest with Sigourney Weaver and Tim Allen from 1998 about Galaxy Quest. Well, I love the cast. It also has Alan Rickman in it. He plays a really good character in that movie about being disgruntled and trying to find work as an older actor. And I like Tim Allen and Sigourney Weaver's characters. I like all the characters. It's very well done. It's like a spoofer of different Star Wars and Star Trek and all the other sci-fi movies out there. And it's a really good parody movie. And it's well done, well made. It has a lot of tropes in it, but it's tastefully done. It's not written off as something stupid, even though it has kind of some silly humor in it, but it's very well. I like how it shows the main character as being arrogant, naive, almost to a point to where he doesn't realize that the rest of his associates and actors that work with him can't stand his arrogance and his always wanting the spotlight and taking over everything, and he can't see just how arrogant he is until he goes and has that moment where he hears people talking about him when they don't know he's there, and he comes to the realization that he is a bit arrogant. And I like how the movie opens up with that at a Comic-Con and how he has to face his own shortcomings. And it's very cool that they put that in there right from the get-go. Tim Allen plays Quincy Haggard, and he plays that's the commander. And Tim Allen plays his character very well. Like I said, he's very arrogant, just doesn't realize just how far he's fallen from grace with his co-workers and fellow actors. And it's very sad that it's like he doesn't have any friends and he doesn't realize it because he thinks that everybody loves him and everybody wants to be his friend, when in reality he has fans but he doesn't have friends. It shows him in his house afterward, very lonely, very by himself. He has all this money and he just has nobody to share it with, no friends that he can call real friends. It's just, I don't know, it's very sad. Made me feel Weaver plays Lieutenant Madison, and her role in the show, in the movie show that she's at Comic-Con for in this movie, is all she does is repeat the computer and ask the computer questions on the spaceship in this particular movie that they're at Comic-Con for. And that's basically all her character was wrote for, was just, I guess, the sex appeal and maybe some comic relief, which I could see how that would be frustrating. And she played the character very well and showed just how annoyed that the character was with the limited shots that she got on the screen, and how she got infuriated sometimes about how she was cast and how annoying it was, but she still kept things professional and did her job the way she should have. It was really cool. And Alan Rickman plays Dr. Lazarus, and he's disgruntled because he always wanted more fame like the commander had, and he didn't seem to get it. And he was classically trained as an actor, and he feels, I guess, for a lack of a better word, jilted, and it feels like nobody cares, even though he had fans of his own. And there was always that one line he seemed to hate, which I could kind of get that. If you're an actor, you probably have those lines or movies that you don't like, and it was part of the show that made him famous, this character famous. And I don't know, it was fun to watch, and how they ended up getting these reluctant would-be heroes are mistaken for actual, I guess for a lack of a better term, astronauts. These aliens mistake their movies for historical documents, and they're being persecuted, and these aliens need them to help defeat the genocidal maniac that's trying to wipe them out of existence. So that's how these characters get dragged into an intergalactic battle that they unwittingly signed up for, and they at least were able to see it through to fruition and help these aliens reclaim their dignity and their right to live, and just help them conquer some of their fears, and help these aliens realize that they already had a commander and that they needed to keep fighting and pushing through, and that they was able to show the aliens that they were resourceful, and it just helped them realize that they had full potential. And it helped the characters in the movie realize that just because they're actors doesn't mean they should just be so short-sighted, and they should expand their horizons. One of my favorite movies growing up as a teenager was called Ever After with Drew Barrymore, and it was based off the fairy tale of Cinderella. And I love how they did this recreation of Cinderella with Drew Barrymore, and I love how they set it up as a real story that had real possibilities of actually happening in France during a certain time period. And this was made in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And Drew Barrymore did a beautiful job playing Cinderella. And I love how they gave her character a name that was not Cinderella. That Cinderella was just her nickname. And how she had a real name. And Drew Barrymore's character was named Danielle de Barbarac. And how she lived with her stepmother and two sisters. And how one of the sisters was nice and one was mean. And I love Angelica Houston as the stepmother. It showed depth to the character that a lot of them don't get right or even show or attempt to show. And it showed just how women had it bad back then. If they weren't married, they were destitute almost. And it just showed that the stepmother had been turned bitter and hard-hearted from years of just being neglected and cast aside, and how she had to be manipulative and cunning to help try to protect her daughters, but in doing so, she turned one of her daughters mean like her. It was well done, well written, and how Danielle de Barbarac as Cinderella, which is played by Drew Barrymore, how she was smart, clever, hardworking, adventurous, and how she wasn't just one-sided like some of the versions that Disney has done. I love how this movie was produced and done, and it still stands the test of time. The Cinderella character, which is played by Drew Barrymore, she grows up, she becomes 18 years old. She's right off the bat is very adventurous, courageous, and goes to help save a servant that's lived on their property for a long time, because of course she's now serving as a servant herself to her stepmother and two sisters, and the younger sister's nice to her and tries to help her, but the older sister, she's a nasty piece of work like her mom. It just shows the dynamic of the family. But anyway, she goes, Danielle de Barbarac, who's Cinderella, which is played by Drew Barrymore, she goes and gets dressed up and pretends to be a courtier to save this servant of hers that her stepmother sold to pay her debt, which was he was getting sent to the Americas, and she got the money by accidentally hitting the Crown Prince of France in the head with an apple when he was trying to borrow their horse, technically speaking. Borrow, of course, with air quotes. But anyway, she takes the money he gives her for her silence and goes to the court and dresses up and plays pretend as a courtier and gets her servant back and has a run-in again with the prince, but this time she's dressed up and he doesn't recognize her as the servant who hit him in the head and knocked him off the horse, which was so funny. But anyway, she captured his attention the second time around when they're in court talking, but she's able to sneak away with the servant and return him home. And of course the stepmother she doesn't even think about it. She's like totally oblivious to why he would just be let go, and which I guess that neglect is their savior in the beginning of the movie. Drew Barrymore's character, which is Danielle de Barbarac, which is also nicknamed AKA Cinderella, She is slowly forming a relationship with the prince. He thinks that she's a courtier, and she used her mother's name as the name she gave him and turned the name into a courtier name, even though that wasn't true. Which is interesting though, because her dad did have nobility, but her mom didn't. So I guess her mom died, and then when her dad died, the land passed to her stepmother because they had just gotten married, and it was legal. So she just missed out, which is very sad that her dad died. But yeah, timing was off. And when her dad died, you could tell that the mother was jealous because he looked at his daughter and told her he loved her, which I get how she might be jealous, but they were just newlyweds, and she didn't know that he had a daughter. So why would he not take the opportunity when he knows he's dying to say he loved his daughter? I mean, how? I don't know. It's just very sad. Times back then were different. Women were treated a lot different. They were property, and they didn't get to hold property. They didn't get to own their own land, have jobs, nothing. It was hard to get money, make money, which is next to impossible in that time century, and it was just really hard time for women. By the end of the movie, Prince and Danielle de Barbarac, Cinderella, has gotten together. They get married secretly, and the prince didn't marry the arranged marriage person that he was supposed to marry. He got to choose who he wanted to marry. He ended up marrying her, and they invited her stepmother and two sisters, and the stepmother and the sister that was mean to her had to be punished for lying to the royalty, and they were going to send her to the Americas, send both of them to the Americas, but they didn't. They kept them there and kept them as servants, which was kind of a poetic turn of events and irony for them, which I thought was hilarious. And the sister that was nice to her got to stay with her as her sister and companion, and that was really sweet that she at least got one sister out of it, which, I don't know, it made me feel kind of happy that she at least got one sister, even though it was a stepsister. But I also like another movie that Drew Barrymore did called Never Been Kissed, and it's from that time period too, of the late 90s, early 2000s. And in this movie of Never Been Kissed, she plays a news editor, and she's not long out of college, and she's very smart, very clever, very kind, a bit of a homebody, and she's one day dreams of being a reporter instead of just a... In this movie, Drew Barrymore's character is named Josie Geller, and of course she's an editor wanting to be a reporter, and well, it kind of starts out kind of okay. Antics and shenanigans ensue. She has to figure out how to re-navigate through high school, because the first time around, when she was in high school, she was a nerd. Nothing wrong with that. And she was also a math geek, and it shows that when she goes back into that situation, she gets hooked up with these mathletes because they welcome her, even though the cool kids, once again, don't. So she has to figure out how to make it in with the cool crowd, which is something that her brother helped her with, because he reassigns up for school as well, taking her lead, because he missed out on this baseball sport because of mono when he was also in high school, and they help each other. She has to heal from being bullied. She has to figure out, I guess, if she likes this one particular teacher that she's forming an attachment to, even though she is of legal age, and he doesn't know that, and he does stand off and kind of back off from it, but her boss over all of them wants to exploit that just because, even though there's nothing actually happening, he wants to exploit it for a story. And in the end, she's able to write a really good, solid story using her own life and her new experience of going back to high school, and how some things never change and how some things do. And she used her own personal experience, and And she even got the guy at the end, and everything was set right. She even helped her brother get a job as a coach at that school, and it works out, which is a really cool thing. Another movie I like is called Where the Heart Is with Natalie Portman in it. And that was the first movie I think I ever saw with Natalie Portman. And I really love that movie. And she's a really good actor. And her character is called Novaline Nation. And she's a pregnant young woman who gets abandoned by her boyfriend in a random town in the Midwest. And she's pretty much homeless, doesn't have money or a job, nowhere to live. Ends up living out of the Walmart until her baby's born. Gets a tiny bit of notoriety from that, but at least she ends up with a place to stay from a local woman that she befriends, and that lady becomes her surrogate mother, and she gets a job at Walmart because they offer her a job. Eventually she becomes a photographer, and she named her daughter America. Her ex-boyfriend, Willie Jack, who abandoned her, gets thrown in jail for a while because of some crimes he committed, and while in jail he writes a song and gets some notoriety from it, and that song makes him a one-hit wonder because he goes to Nashville to get it produced, and he has no loyalties to anyone but himself, and gets himself into all kinds of trouble and chaos. And meanwhile, Novaline back in Oklahoma, she gets settled down with her friends, close friends and family that she's created for herself and that she's found, and starts to lead a better life. And her daughter, America's Nation, really grow into the community and become staples there. She has her job at Walmart that she holds on to for a long time. She then becomes a photographer as a hobby, like Moses Whitecotton, another character in there that got her onto it. She gets some notoriety after a natural disaster in her town that she snaps some photos of, and she gets some notoriety from it, and she got a lot of going for her. She ends up getting married at the end of the movie, and to the library guy named Forney Hull, who really loves her, treats her well. He's a adopted father figure for her daughter, and the only father figure her daughter's ever known, which is really cool that her daughter had that, a father figure in her life. Another movie I used to watch as a kid in the late 1990s, early 2000s is called A Knight's Tale by Heath Ledger. He plays the character of William Thatcher, a peasant-born squire for a knight. Him and two other squires help serve the knight. They help get his gear ready. They do stuff at his request. When the knight does well in tournaments, they do well. They get to eat and have basic luxuries like that, and even basic needs met. But when the knight doesn't do well, they suffer, all of them. And I love how the movie is beautifully portrayed. It shows that particular lifestyle in a modernized way. I love the balance in it and how the people working on it, the director and all them, I love how they balance everything and make everything cohesive and work together in a modern twist on jousting and how the characters would interact with each other. And Heath Ledger and Mark Addy and some of the others that played in it, they worked really well together, and their characters got along in the movie because of it. And you can really tell they had a kinship and a camaraderie that translates well through the movie and onto the screen, and you really get the feel of kinsmanship in them and how they form a bond of friendship and then family unity with each other. And it's a really cool movie to watch. I loved it. I used to watch the heck out of it because I really liked the movie, and I loved Heath Ledger in that movie. He was a really good actor. It's just sad he passed away so soon and so early because he really did So in A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger's character of William Thatcher plays a peasant, and when his master dies, the knight, he defies convention norms of the day and starts masquerading as a knight himself with his master's used armor. And he tries to bring himself riches and glory along with his two comrades in arms that worked with him under the previous knight's tutelage. And his dad put him in the apprenticeship with these two other characters with the knight so that he could have a better life to get out of poverty and not be subjected to that, and at least have a chance at something better in life. And I love how they portray that on screen, and I just love how he gets in that mindset of, let's define the norms. Why can't I be a knight? Why can't I improve my situation? Why can't I improve my resources, my finances, my life? Why do I gotta stay stuck in the slums and never have a chance to get better, never have a chance to improve my circumstances? I like how he fights and bucks against that tradition of staying within your class and not having anything better in life and not rising above your own station and wanting to do better and wanting to lead a better life. And it's portrayed beautifully in the movie. And I like how he reunites with his dad toward the end and helps his dad out and rekindles that, and how he's able to find his dad in London toward the end. And I like how the prince at the time returned the favor and actually knighted him when they faced off in a jousting tournament before that, and how that worked in his favor, surprisingly enough, which was a kind of cool little twist onto the movie. Another movie I used to love as a kid was done by Disney called Hercules. And I don't like how Disney butchered the folklore of that, because in the Disney movie, they had Hera and Zeus as Herc's father. But Hercules' father was Zeus, but his mother was a mortal human, making him a demigod from the get-go. And his ability was super strength and power. He was never an immortal, and he was never Hera's son. I don't know why they did that in the cartoon retelling of it. I guess maybe to give it a different spin, maybe, and clean it up and sanitize it for children, maybe. It's the only thing I can think why they might have done that. And, what was it? And another thing, I don't like how they portrayed, what's his face? Hades. He was more neutral and moody, and he would get in his bad moods, and he had a very bad temper, and sometimes he would conspire with his other siblings and family members to take over Zeus's spot, but it was never by himself. He would never want that kind of power just by himself, because he was the king of the underworld, and his primary job was to regulate the underground and the souls and the three levels of heaven, hell, and the plains of Asphodel. His purpose was never just to rule the entire world. He had bigger fish to fry, and when he did help his other siblings at one point to try to overthrow Zeus, it wasn't just by himself. It wasn't alone, which I don't know why they messed up that little bit of trivia. And the three titans he supposedly let loose, only one of them was from the actual myth. The others were just made up. It was creative. Disney was definitely creative, but they took a lot of liberties and licenses with this version of Hercules, which was really interesting. And I noticed how they mixed a lot of different mythology. It's like they mixed Christian mythology with this, and this was Greek mythology. It's like they mixed Christian elements and Greek elements of the Hercules stories together, and they almost demonized Hades as Satan, when in reality Hades wasn't Satan from the Christian Bible. And they almost tried to play it that Zeus was God, but then Zeus couldn't be God because he was never married. And the Christian God never had a wife. He never got married. I mean, that's not what the Christian God is. So it's like they were splicing together two different faith systems, which was a little disconcerting looking back on it. But as a kid, I loved that movie. I mean, I love the different symbolisms in it, but at the same time, it was a little disconcerting how they mixed mythology, the Greek mythology mythos with Christianity. I mean, that was a little weird, but which destroyed my childhood because I used to love that movie. Like how Hercules ends, I guess, with the good outweighing the bad, and the heroes win, and the journey of the hero and his tale is told, and Hercules wins the day like he did in the original Greek mythology and mythos, and he gets the girl, but it doesn't tell what happens after. But anyway, I digress. I still like how they ended it with Hercules winning and triumphing over the dark, and he represents the light, and that's a pretty cool thing to show, and how he was willing to give up his immortality as a celestial being to have the girl, because he found out what matters to him and his life and what he wanted, which differed from what his dad Zeus had and wanted for him, and but how they still respected each other. And anyway, I liked how it ended anyway, but it was still different than the original myth of. Another movie I used to watch as a kid was called What About Bob? It had Richard Dreyfuss in it as a therapist, and the other character that played his psychotic patient was Bill Murray, and they did a great job. The movie was so well written and done and performed. They got two comedic actors that played well off each other, that delivered their lines at the right moments, the right times. It was well performed and well done all around. You could really tell they took great time in setting everything up, all the scenes, and the cast was all-star. It was really nice to watch, and it was good to see the chemistry the actors had and how that translated into their characters' performance, and how they interacted as characters, and how they made that movie like one of the greatest movies of that genre. Which Richard Dreyfuss's character is a therapist, and he's very conceited. He sees himself as Muhammad at the top of the mountain, on top of his game, writing books, trying to promote the book, trying to have it all. He has a wife and two kids, a boy and a girl, and he was so pretentious that he got his wife to name his son Sigmund. Just really, you named your son Sigmund. Oh my God. The character set up for these characters was well planned, performed beautifully, just very full of himself. The character that Richard Dreyfuss played was full of himself. He played and delivered it very well. And of course, Bill Murray's character was a patient of his, a new patient that a retiring therapist gives him, because the retiring therapist hates him. So he wanted to sabotage Richard Dreyfuss' character, the character's practice, and he did a good job in setting him up to take the fall, which was really hilarious but sad at the same time, because I'm thinking in real life there'd be no way a therapist would tolerate a patient hunting them down and interacting with their family like that. But in the movies and on paper, it's a very good movie idea, but in real life that wouldn't work. It's one of those movies that's played very well as a movie plot, but in real life it wouldn't work at all, which is kind of fascinating to look back on it, because as a kid I was like, oh well, he's just a harmless person. Well, not all people that are in therapy are harmless, and to cross boundaries with your therapist creates a whole lot of issues, especially the ones that Bob was crossing with his therapist, and the struggles Bob had. He really needed, I don't know if there was anything that many therapists could have done for him. had so many issues that I don't think he was willing to address and deal with right away. And it was so prolonged in this character's life. It was almost as if it just taken root. I love at the end of the movie how Bob and his therapist roles had reversed. Almost, it's like almost that kind of madness that's flipped to the other person, and how this therapist was trying to kill him in the woods, and how it didn't work, and then Bob ends up marrying his sister, which just totally just couldn't even imagine that situation, how it would play out in real life, but it was a pretty cool movie to watch. But anyway, I hope y'all watch that and enjoy it.